Hello people, Virus here again, and today we're going to be looking at chemical reactions of metals and non-metals, particularly when we're reacting with oxygen, okay? We're going to give you a little bit of information, then we're going to do a couple questions, and then we're going to go information and then questions again, just to give you that information in chunks and see if you can digest that better, okay? So let's jump into it.
It was a nightmare.
Activate.
Okay, so chemical reactions of metals and non-metals. So our first learning objective is going to be to name substances formed when metals and non-metals react with oxygen. Now, all elements in the periodic table have two kinds of properties. They can either have physical properties or they can have chemical properties. Now, physical properties, these are the ones that we can observe without actually changing the material, okay? So if you can test for the conduction of electricity or the conduction of heat in a specific metal, you can do that and you can see that, you can feel the transfer of energy, you can monitor the transfer of energy, but that metal will remain that metal, okay? So if you're doing it with copper wire, once the experiment is done, that will still be a copper wire, okay? And that's what we're referring to. Now, in the chemical properties, this is how substances react with other elements and usually involves a chemical reaction, right? When elements react with oxygen, they form compounds called oxides, and that's very important to remember, okay? Now, say for instance over here we have a molecule of carbon and I have a molecule of we have a molecule of carbon oxide or carbon monoxide, and we have a molecule of carbon dioxide, okay? Both of them have one atom of carbon each. This one here, carbon monoxide, has one molecule of oxygen, and carbon dioxide has two molecules of oxygen. Now the only difference here is that for the prefix mono, which means once, we're gonna put it on the carbon monoxide, and dioxide, which means two, we're gonna put it over here because this molecule has two atoms of oxygen, okay? And that's something important you gotta remember. Mono means one, or just oxide, it means you just have one oxygen. But if it says di, it has two oxygens. If it has tri, it has three oxygens on them, okay? Because that's what those prefixes mean. Okay, task number one. For this, you can pause the video whilst you get yourself prepared and you look for the answer. So task number one would be to use the periodic table to find the name for the following oxide compound. Now, I'm giving you the symbols. What you have to do is now you have to find out what Ca means, and it has one oxygen. What Be means, and it's got one oxygen. So you gotta find out the actual names and write down the actual name of the compound that those symbols are representing, okay? Now you can print the worksheet from the description below, or you can write it down behind, it's your choice, okay? Obviously this is 6 marks, so keep a tally of how many marks you got, okay? So, go. Right, so hopefully you had enough time to get that done, and we're gonna look at the answers. So we got calcium oxide, beryllium oxide, silicon dioxide, lithium oxide, potassium oxide, and sulfur oxide, okay? Learning objective number 2. We're gonna try and classify the substances formed when metals and non-metals react with oxygens, okay? So now we know that metals and non-metals can react with oxygen and they make compounds called oxides, right? Now we're gonna try and classify those oxides. So, when a metal reacts with oxygen, it forms a metal oxide. Metal plus oxygen, metal oxide. As an example, we have calcium plus oxygen, calcium oxide. Now, if the metal oxide dissolves in water, it's going to be called an alkali. If the metal oxide does not dissolve in the water, it's going to be called a base. Okay? Now, on the other hand, when a non-metal reacts with oxygen, it forms a non-metal oxide. Non-metal oxide plus oxygen gives you a non-metal oxide. For example, we got sulfur plus oxygen will give you sulfur dioxide, okay? It could be an oxide or it could be a dioxide. It depends on what the formula is telling you and what question and what specifically that question is asking about, okay? Now, the non-metal oxide dissolves in water and it forms an acid. Remember, the non-metals will form acids and the metals will form either bases or alkalis. Now, we are familiar with acids and alkalis, and it's more or less the same thing as saying acids and bases, okay? So the acids will have a pH from 6 all the way down to 0 or 1, and that makes that substance acidic. And anything that is alkali or basic will be from a pH of 8 all the way down to 14, okay? So if it's 8 to 14, it can either be an alkali or it can be a base, depending on whether it dissolves in water or not. And if it's got anything between 6 down to 0 or 1, that means it's an acid, okay? Right, so task number 2. Identify the following compounds, whether they're acid or bases. You got 6 marks for this. So you got calcium oxide, beryllium oxide, silicon dioxide, lithium oxide, potassium oxide, and sulfur oxide. So right next to the arrow, you got to write down whether they are bases or they are acids. So you can pause the video and get your answers written down. Okay, so hopefully that would have been enough time, and let's see how many marks you got right, and hopefully you're not cheating as well. Right, so let's see. Calcium oxide would be a base, beryllium oxide would be a base. Then we have silicon, because silicon is a non-metal, will make an acid. Lithium is a metal, so lithium oxide would be a base. Potassium is a metal, so potassium oxide would be a base. Sulfur is a non-metal, so sulfur oxide will turn into an acid, okay? Learning objective number 3. We're gonna describe an oxidation reaction with word equations and a particle diagram. So a chemical reaction is when different substances react together. When a substance reacts with oxygen, it can be described as an oxidation reaction. So as we can see here, we have carbon and we have oxygen. When they react together, that's why they call them reactants, because they react together, they produce the product carbon dioxide, okay? And this is basically what we got. We got word equation, okay, and then we have a particle diagram just showing us the movement of those atoms across the equation, okay, from reactants to products. So moving on, draw a particle diagram, word equation and symbol equation for the oxidation of magnesium with oxygen. Note, the product of the reaction has only 1 magnesium and 1 oxygen. That's a bit of a hint. So you can pause the video and get your answers right, and for this you will have 3 marks. Okay, so this is what your answer should look like. You draw the diagram, you have the magnesium and you have the oxygen, and then you have your magnesium oxide. You got your reactants, which are reacting together, and then you got your product, which is what's being produced. The word equation will be magnesium plus oxygen, and it gives you magnesium oxide, and the chemical or symbol equation will be Mg plus O, and it will give you MgO, okay? We're not gonna get too into specifics of why oxygen is O2, that will save that for another lesson. Okay, so question number 4, sort out the following into the right section. What you're going to do is that you're gonna have a column that says metal and a column that says non-metals, and you're gonna place those in the right column, okay? Again, you can pause the video to get a chance to get this done, and then we continue. Right, so we got enough time, and let's see the results. Remember to write down your marks. So for here you will have high melting points and form basic oxides on the metals, and then you have brittle and form acidic oxides in the non-metals. Right, task number 5, finding the video and fill in the missing words. Tip, look for pink, right? So what you do is that you can fill in the missing words as you go through the video and put them in your worksheet. Elements have physical properties and chemical properties. Physical properties are the ones that we can observe, and chemical reactions and chemical properties usually need a chemical reaction. 1 oxygen means monoxide and 2 oxygens means dioxide. When metals that react with oxygen can be bases or alkalis, the chemical reaction between a substance and oxygen is called an oxidation reaction. So there you go, guys. Very nice and simple, very useful information. I tried to just cover the most important bits of information that you're going to need, and the most likely ones to come in an exam question, okay? Now, it doesn't mean that the questions are gonna be exactly like they are over here. They might give you different examples, but as long as you understand the concept behind it, right? It doesn't matter whether they give you a different example. Now, normally what I tell my students is that if you understand how football works and you know what an offside is, you know what a throw is or a penalty and whatnot, as long as you understand the rules of the game, it doesn't matter what team is playing, you will understand what's happening. So this is the same thing in everything that applies into your school life. If you understand the concept, it doesn't matter what example they give you, because you understand how it works, you should be able to guess those answers right, okay? If not, there's always room for improvement, okay? So, see you next time.